Hi friends, it is August 1st, 2026, and today I want to do something more strategic. I'm going to be doing an overview of a prayer strategy for the end of this war. And so I'm so grateful for each of you who through the years have been praying with us, praying from a place of hope. But last night's attack on Kyiv just re-emphasized what needs to change. Many of you know that last night 185 attack drones and 35 missiles came screaming in, and of those, only 83% of those attack drones were stopped because Russia is moving away from normal Shaheds and using more of the Gerbar, the jet-powered drones that are a little harder to stop. But as far as the missiles, oh my gosh, only 2 out of 35 were stopped. 3 additionally were stopped simply by going off course, either for failure or through signal jamming. But guys, prayer does work. But guys, something needs to change. Still, 4 of those Zircons and 26 of those ballistic missiles, as well as 23 UAVs, hit locations. 10 dead, 50 wounded. But more than this, it reveals the fundamental fact that Russia has gone all in on ballistic missiles because the U.S. has now said they will not provide the means to make the Patriot missiles to the Ukrainians. The word on the street is that Boeing is declaring they don't want to give away their proprietary information for fear it might be stolen. But also Boeing is really struggling financially, and Patriot missiles, there's nothing like it in town. They can charge what they want. They're charging 3 or 4 times as much as what Firepoint is possibly going to be producing this fall. And they're not willing to give up their cash cow. Guys, pray that there is international pressure, because this really brings me to the first part of the key thing for the strategy of how to pray for the end of this war, and for the protection of lives and for bloodless resolution. The first thing, and if you go into the description below, you'll see a detailed breakdown of this prayer strategy. You can copy and paste for your own use. But this is it. The first is anti-ballistic missile strategy. There has to be breakthrough here. There's multiple ways this can happen. One of them is there's a Italian Franco system that has some capability against ballistic missiles. The Ukrainian government has been begging for these from France and Italy. Pray that those get released. Pray that more Patriot missiles are released from the rest of Europe. Pray that there is a breakthrough in the development of the Freya or the FP9 and FP7 missiles that are being developed at this time. Pray. Continue to pray for the Ukrainians to identify parts of the ballistic missile system whereby Russia is producing 100 a month. And they destroy them, the factories, but also they destroy the stockpiles. Guys, regardless, Russia has not been able to use the fullness of what they're producing. We don't know why. We don't know on what level it's failures, what that is. But at the same time, North Korea started to provide more. And the first evidence of those is a North Korean missile hit into Polish territory and went 100 kilometers in. Now, they're claiming, oh, it's a mistake. The Polish are going, we think it was a mistake. The reality, though, is if you look inside that North Korean missile, you'll see that instead of payload, it had a lot more gas to go a lot further. In other words, it went as far as it was supposed to. And that makes us think this is another probing attack by Russia on what is going to be the response of NATO. They've done the same thing in Romania, and Romania has actually begun to shoot down drones and actually move against it. This is great, but guys, I want to tell you, this ballistic missile strategy has to come on board. Guys, pray. If you've got divine downloads of ways to pray about that, guys, put that in the comments below. As always, when you've got a prayer strategy you're feeling from the Lord, put it down below. When you see someone say something that resonates with your heart, like, comment. This is how we raise up prayer together. Guys, thank you for sharing and liking. The second thing is we've got to pray because winter is coming, and this is tied to the ballistic missile issue. Zelensky has made it incredibly clear there has got to be more has to be done in the area of the heating and electric infrastructure. So much damage that was done over the winter. It was a particularly harsh winter. That they're not back on path, but also they haven't been able to harden these resources. In other words, if Russia chooses to strike something with a ballistic missile, they have no means to stop it, less than last winter, and two, it's going to do massive damage, and there are going to be many, many lives lost. So guys, pray as they're working hard to both harden those assets, but also redevelop and redistribute and hide various parts of the electrical and heating grid. This is massive, that they get the support they need from the West to do that. Another piece, though, is we're really praying into the whole anti-corruption thing. Now, this is just my take. I don't know anything, but I watched when we went back in last April when Yermak was the head of the presidential commission, and he was the anti-corruption organization was attacking him, and the exact same thing happened then as happened with Fedorov. Zelensky did the rash thing and got rid of the anti-corruption thing. Now you got to understand, everything Zelensky's been doing is trying to get in good with the EU, get in good with NATO. They demand that the anti-corruption thing is a core part of that. So getting rid of it is just like shooting himself in the head. But what it did is it caused massive rallies and people rising up. And as a result, oh no, brought back the anti-corruption thing and got rid of Yermak. So in order to do everything that Zelensky's been doing, and this is the same around the world, this is the same in the US, this is the same in the UK, you have to work with corrupt entities. But you can't be their slave. And one of the things we've been watching from day one of Zelensky, going back to 2019, 2020, Zelensky has been crawling out of the clutches of these corrupt powers that have held Ukraine in its thrall since the Soviet Union. Many of the people in power in that old Soviet structure are people that rose up during the KGB and the Communist Party structures. So there's a clan called the Dnipro clan that still has a great deal of power. And so what has happened, though, is this, I believe, him sacking Fedorov is exactly the same. Because if he had gotten rid of Syrsky, nobody would have been rioting in the streets. Nobody would have been protesting. If he got rid of Syrsky, people would be celebrating, but the powerful people would shut things down. But he gets rid of Fedorov, and the people come out to the streets demanding Fedorov's return. They are demanding Fedorov's return. The protests are ramping up, and this is awesome. I believe it's handing Zelensky the means. He's already extended to Fedorov the means to invite him back. Fedorov, I believe, right now is negotiating how much power he's going to have. So, guys, pray for humility on Zelensky and Fedorov's side, because I believe Zelensky wants to give Fedorov as much power as possible, but that power is going to cut into the corrupt people because of the way Fedorov is cleaned up so much of the space. One of the issues here is Firepoint, one of the organizations that makes all those missiles, FP1, FP5, FP3, FP7, FP9, they actually are part of the problem. So guys, pray for corruption to come to light. We've always said this, truth is on the side of love and light. So pray for Fedorov to come back, to have the power and the means to continue to clean up corruption, because he's going to work so well with Drapatyi, who's the head of the military. And so guys, thank goodness. Continue to pray for Drapatyi, who is now the head of the military, that he will have the means and the power to clean up the vestiges of this Soviet system. Now, one of the things I've got to tell you about this, it's not just a military. A lot of people want to talk about it's like top down. It's the difference between empowered decision making. It's a fundamental, deeply rooted mentality that was received from the czars, who received it from the Mongols. It is a system of abuse and destructive. It is just absolutely abusive and destructive. And the vestiges of it within the Ukrainian military came with Syrsky. Drapatyi is a totally new beast. 43 years old, graduated with a master's from the War College in the U.S. War College. He is a different breed altogether, and he has a heart and a means to clean up, to take personal responsibility, to not hide, and actually to protect lives. Guys, pray for him to have that ability, because it's going to protect lives. Bloodless resolution. So the next thing is, we're praying about military victory in Ukraine. So what does that mean? Now, we've been talking a lot about Crimea. This is absolutely essential for a couple reasons. One is, Crimea has never been an option for Russia. Never. They will never give it up. Never, never, never. Well, guess what? The people the 1 million some settlers who came in to the land rush when Russia started giving away the land they had stolen in 2014 are fleeing massively. That is awesome. This is huge. It's undoing a deep injustice. Pray that they have the ability and the means to continue to flee. Magyar has made it very, very clear that they are not going to take out the Kerch Bridge. They're trying to allow for people to escape. It's awesome. This is what we've been praying about, and praise God, that's what they're pursuing, bloodless resolution. At the same time, there's no electricity, there's no gas for anybody in Crimea, except if you have military plates. But here's the problem: most of the military run on vehicles with normal plates. In other words, their stuff got blown up. They're being given like a Lada or a Bukhanka van that has normal plates. They can't get gas. So literally the entire Crimea is being starved of its ability to defend itself. And so Russia's having to divert more and more resource to try to strengthen it. At the same time, all their ferries are taken out. 179 of their ships coming across to try to refuel it are out. It's just this absolute bleeding mess. And that is awesome, because it's also draining away resource from the rest of the front. And we're seeing that as the Russians have literally abandoned the highway that runs from Berdyansk to Mariupol and on to Rostov. They've abandoned it because they cannot get people to drive it, and because if you drive it, you're dead. And so as a result, how are they going to get any resources to the front line? It is becoming increasing, and you're seeing, this leads to the other piece, is that Zaporizhia and Kherson are weakening more and more and more. And so all of this means that a couple things is, if things were set right, if Drapatyi had the real coordination with Fedorov, with all the drone capability, there could be a massive coordinated push that could collapse the entire Western Front. That would be incredible. Because I've said this before, one of the keys for this war ending is a massive, overwhelming, visible victory by Ukraine in the field. So many of you have worried about Konstantinivka. There have been a lot of failures in Konstantinivka, but it has not fallen. It is still available, and part of the reason is, as many as you might say, there were mistakes made in Bakhmut, there were mistakes made in Avdiivka. The reality is, the price that Russia is having to pay for this is unbelievable. And they are literally bringing themselves into a trap, because there's literally only one way out of Konstantinivka. So it's really, they're hoping for a base for winter, but it's not, at the very least, it's a Pyrrhic victory. It is not this massive end all. So guys, continue to pray for bloodless resolution. What does that mean? That means identifying targets with fuel depots, ammunition depots, particularly missile depots, identifying aircraft and anti-missile batteries, being able to take out all of the means of killing, so that everything grinds to a halt on the Russian side. In the middle of all this, please be praying as far as negotiations are concerned, because for the very first time, there is supposedly on the books, Kushner and Witkoff are going to be coming to Kyiv in August. Pray about that. Pray for consciences to awaken in them. Thus far, all they've seemed to be interested in is the money that has been dangled, the $1 trillion deal that has been dangled in front of Trump and his people by Russia. And thus far, pray that they see the human destruction that the Russians are doing. Guys, pray that, guys, it's so easy for the world to become numb to what's going on. And so, guys, pray for that. And continue in Ukraine to pray for the church, because the church is still on the move. Yes, they are exhausted. Yes, they're tired. But we really believe this is a season, and we'll be talking about this on other days. This is a season when the church needs to begin to pivot from a bunker mentality to begin to prepare for peace, to begin to move as the doors will open on the other side of peace for the harvest. And so, Vladimir and Liliya and the Church Wildberries are ministering to pastors throughout the territories, up to around the front lines. They continue to serve so many. We are talking about the possibility of doing maybe a camp or a retreat with those pastors later on this fall. Pray about that. They're ministering to so many of the refugees constantly. They're constantly on the search. People honestly are constantly saying, how are you getting supplies? Means God, they give away everything they have, so God keeps providing them with more. And I'm so grateful to all of you all who have given and supported them in that. It's made all the difference. And they, again, when we were just with them last week or the week before, they kept saying how grateful they are to each of you, and they wouldn't have made it without you. So again, if you want to give to what they're doing, ariselife.org/help Ukraine, all one word. I'll try to put the link in a comment below. But guys, thank you. But our friends John and Tanya Lynch are also in on this, and I merely share them. There are so many churches, there are so many ministries working that are awesome, and I just share them to give you an example so that you don't just get overwhelmed by the horror, because the kingdom is advancing. John and Tanya Lynch just had a conference in Kharkiv, and it was amazing. And then their teams of volunteers are going right up to the front lines and getting people out. They've got churches of refugees throughout Ukraine. Guys, God's on the move. So if you want to support them, go to goforthmissions.org. But anyway, and anybody else for that matter, guys, continue to pray. So the next piece I want to say is turning to Russia, because we've said this throughout, that there are three massive keys to the end of this war. And the first one we talked about was a Ukrainian victory. And one piece of that means the military needs to collapse. And so the military they are absolute, utter, complete deficit of officers and generals. They have both allowed themselves to allow theirs to be killed. And we've seen multiple strikes on officers by the Ukrainian, by SBU, but also they themselves have killed many of their own officers. The best officers have always been killed in the Tsarist and the Russian troops because they are, and communist troops, because they are seen as insubordinate or threats to the people, the corrupt powers above. And so that continues to collapse. The other piece, though, is they are seriously looking at a mobilization. They're talking August 23rd of blocking anybody whose draft age, which is like, I think, up to 50, from traveling abroad, as well as, and then starting in September, doing a massive mobilization with the goal to get as many as 365,000 troops by the end of the year. That being said, they're not hitting their goals right now, and they are allowing to be destroyed in the meat grinder upwards of 50% more than they needed. Like, they were claiming they needed 1,100. We're seeing them allowing 1,600 casualties a day. Guys, this is not sustainable. And so, guys, continue to pray. Again, they're still dreaming. The Kremlin is still dreaming of opening a front into the Baltics, into Poland, into Romania, in Transnistria. Guys, pray that all that just breaks down. But the reason why we can be excited about that possibility is there is constantly a war in the Kremlin. I'm going to finish with that. But the next piece that we've always said that needs to happen is that the people of Russia need to wake up. Well, it's more than the people of Russia. It's the people of Moscow and St. Petersburg in particular. One of the lines you say in Russia is Moscow is not Russia. The rest of Russia is a third world country by and large. But Moscow is a first world country. Moscow has always been sucking the best to itself, and the lifestyle is twice as good as anywhere else. It's European. But guess what? And as a result, the Kremlin has tried to insulate the Russian people, particularly the Muscovites, from feeling the war. Well, guess what? They're feeling it. No gas. Most Muscovites have some sort of means of power transportation. Well, what good is a car without gas? and so the internet has blown up with people talking about their search for gas. Well, the Kremlin has criminalized saying anything having to do with gas shortages. That's the whole point of social media. Talk about the burning issues, and that's the most burning issue for people who have cars. Second piece, though, underneath people who have cars, but including, is Wildberries, the Amazon. With taking out the Amazon, which is a totally legitimate military target, because they've literally, it's through Wildberries that the drone groups are getting their drone equipment. I mean, you can go on to Wildberries and you'll see all the drone equipment for the front there on Wildberries. It is a military operation, but at the same time, it's so much more. And it's not just Amazon, it's also like Etsy and eBay, where everybody is selling on there and all their stuff is out there. And what has happened is, with hitting the Wildberries, everybody feels it. I was hoping to get this Chinese junk and I didn't get it. I was depending on to have my shampoo. I don't have it. But then you've all of the small and mid-sized companies who had all their stock on there. Now, Wildberries has turned to the Kremlin and said, we need a bailout of 120 billion rubles, $1 billion. We need that. We need that just to survive. And we estimate we've already experienced 200 billion rubles of damage. Now, hold this. That's not stock. That's infrastructure, because upwards of 25% of the warehouses have been taken out. That's just infrastructure. In fact, they're talking about only giving, I forget how much, like 1.2 billion rubles. I forget out what it is. It was 0.03% reimbursement to the people for the stuff they lost. So think about that. That's like 3 cents on every $10. They're talking about reimbursing the people whose stock was there. So instantaneously, you're watching all these mid-level and small business owners lost everything. So this is hitting Moscow hard. The people are waking up. And I've said that's a key. So at the beginning of the war, we said this, right? Ukraine wins in the field, and that the people wake up, and the people are waking up. The next piece, though, is safety. Sobyanin, the Moscow mayor, has just said that over 6,225 drones were targeted Moscow during the month of July, average of 20 a day. Guys, that's crazy. In other words, Russians, Muscovites are seeing drones going overhead. In other words, the evidence that the part of the contract that Russia has with the Muscovites is, we do whatever we want and you get to have good food, gas, nice life and safety. Well, they're losing safety. They're losing their good stuff through Wildberries. They're losing the very stuff that makes them happy, the very part of the contract. So you might go, wait a minute. So this creates pressure at every level of the people who are actually working in the Kremlin. They're feeling that pressure rising. They wouldn't feel it if it's in Vladivostok or Rostov-on-Don or Kolyma. Yeah, they're feeling it from the Muscovites. And so the final piece, though, is freedom. And as I mentioned before, they're getting nailed for actually doing videos talking about gas shortages. This is their life. So they're getting banned for actually showing videos of drones exploding outside their building or refineries exploding outside their building. And so what people are doing is they're doing this thing where they'll be like, hey, I want to show you this nice watch I have. And in the background, you can see the fires glowing. Or oh my gosh, let me show you my makeup. And in the background, you see a drone blown up. Or they'll be like, oh, I just want to show you my new dress. And you see the line of cars for the gasoline. They can't say it out loud. But it's gotten so bad that literally one of the videos I just watched was a guy standing on the street, and he was just literally filming the street, and a police van went by, stopped, jumped out, grabbed him, threw him in. They reported that he had been beaten, he had been detained, he had all kinds of stuff done to him. This is what's happening. This mobilization that I told you about, the 365, a lot of it's hybrid. In other words, it's just vans going around stealing people, grabbing people, throwing them in, boom, boom, boom. we're going to see this pressure growing. So guys, continue to pray for the truth to come out. The final piece we've always said is there's no possibility of peace with the powers that be because they do not want peace. And that's actually become clear. That has absolutely become clear. Literally, Trump has said it absolutely clearly. I don't know why anybody's not listening. He says it over and over again. Trump says it. Putin says it. Like they don't want peace. They want what they want, and they don't want to stop. They want to pause maybe, but then they want to keep going to take all of Ukraine. They want to take everything that the Soviet Union used to have. That's their goal. And they've said it from beginning to end. And so as a result, they have said very clearly to Witkoff and Kushner when they were there in the Kremlin last week, they said, absolutely, we still want all of Donbass. Why? Here's why they want Donbass. This war started literally because Shell Oil in 2013, 2014 began to dig into the Zuviesk gas field. It's under Slavyansk. Slavyansk is a city that Russia is trying to take. Why are they trying to take it? Why are they demanding it? Because under it is a 3.6 trillion cubic meters of gas. That is massive. And that 3.6, that's the what do you want to say, the conservative estimate by the U.S. 3.6. So they began to work on the field. They had 2 drills going. That's when the war started at Slavyansk because of that back in 2014. Because Russia will not stop until they get the oil and the minerals and everything that is in the Donbass. That's what this is all about. And so they will not stop. They will not stop until they take all of that. And so you can look it up, by the way, Zuviesk, Zuvieska field. You can find all that information. But anyway, all that to say is they're not going to stop. So, but one of the wonderful things is they are divided. And Jesus said it, a house divided cannot stand, right? It will fall, right? And because of it, they are constantly divided against each other. Originally, under Putin, they were divided 3 ways with Putin and the oligarchs and the Siloviki, the KGB types. And the military, the KGB types and the oligarchs. That's 3-way. Well, the military has been sidelined, pretty much taken out. So now it's just Chemozov leading the oligarchs and Patrushev leading the Siloviki. And man, they can't agree hardly on anything except don't give up Donbass. As a result, they can't negotiate. They won't negotiate in good faith, and then they do stupid things. Like, for instance, this hit by the North Korean missile into Poland. The hits into Romania. Those are 100% coming from Patrushev's camp. Chemozov doesn't want that. He just let's just play nice and end the war, for heaven's sake. But they realize they've got to give up a lot, but they are still not being realistic. But into the middle of it, what have we been praying is for Daniels to arise. Now, this might sound insane. This might sound insane that anybody in the middle of this corrupt system could arise. As many of you know, we've been praying throughout the years for Prime Minister Mishushtin, for the chairman of the central bank, Naibulliyin, also possibly for Mayor Sobyanin. These are not pure lily white as the driven snow kind of people, but these are people who have made their efforts to distance themselves from the war at all cost. They are people who have literally tried to take care of the country and the infrastructure, and they have, and so, and part of it, I was really struggling. I have moments where I'm like, man, maybe this is delusional to even believe that Daniels can arise and build meaningful networks of that could stand up to power. Well, the interesting thing is, one of the great examples is Solzhenitsyn's Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich being published in the middle of the Soviet Union. Just a guy by the name of Tvardovsky dealing it. That's another story. But the one I want to talk to you about is about the death of Stalin. When Stalin died in 1953, there was a guy by the name of Beria who was over the NKVD, that was the predecessor to the KGB, and he was actually, if you can believe it, 5 to 10 times worse than Stalin. He was wicked to the core. He was evil, evil, evil. And his desire was for a greater police state, a greater level of terror and control than was under Stalin. And he had the means to do it. He had all the dossiers on all the other members of the Politburo. He knew where all the bodies were. All the guards of the Kremlin were his. And he was poised. As soon as Stalin died, he was like, hey, 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 you know, separated himself from Stalin, went to the West, said, hey, we'll play nice, made himself out like a reformer, and began to move. And it was a done deal. But guess what? In the middle of that, Khrushchev, underneath Beria's nose, with 1 in 3 of people in the Soviet Union, an informant, put together a network of people, went to all the people who, he said, man, he's going to come for us eventually. They put together a network, went and got Marshal Zhukov, who had led the World War II armies, brought him back in, and they actually managed to take Beria out and totally take apart the NKVD structures. And Khrushchev is the one who then allowed for Solzhenitsyn to be published, and it was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. In that moment, the Soviet Union was poised to become the most horrific dystopian place on earth, more than Stalin could have imagined, and in a moment, it shifted and it began its fall. Guys, this is that moment for Russia. Guys, pray, pray, pray that there will be that kind of network developing in the Kremlin where there is real means for getting rid of those groups in power and actually stand up to injustice and actually end this war. Guys, pray for that. Pray that there will be will in the Trump White House to actually seek those out and develop those relationships with them. Pray. Again, if you say, well, how is that even possible? You can look at the election of John Paul II as another great example. There's so many examples of where God lets his dark horse candidate slide through and get through. So guys, please be praying. I know I've covered a lot. I'm so grateful for each of you guys who stay on here, who like, who share, who comment. What I want to say again is, if you've got a prayer strategy, guys, put it below. If you see a prayer strategy that really strikes your heart, you'll really agree with, drop in on it. But also, please like, share, comment. It makes a difference. I'm so grateful to so many of you who've been with us through the whole journey, and for each of you who just walk alongside of us. Again, we're going to be trying to do several more of these much more strategic posts, so that if you share any post, this is the post you share, that it really helps to raise up. And if you've got questions, you've got concerns, there's things you want to know about, please feel free to put those in the comments below. But again, we love you guys. We're so grateful to each of you all. Be blessed.